Okay. So Garth, welcome once again in Czech Republic. Yes.
Thank you so much.
to this talk for people who are interested in not only yoga but in general for life, how to improve the quality of life and how to bring vitality to life and maybe strength and also peace of mind. So please, I would like to ask the simple first question. How did your journey with yoga begin? How your journey began? And because in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the first sutra is, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. So what was your first Atha now moment and how it all started?
Well, for me, it started, as you may know, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I have multiple sclerosis. There are different ranges of it, but I was diagnosed, it'll be 27 years in May of 2023. I was diagnosed as a younger man. I basically lost feeling in my body. I was having difficulty walking, being able to move my fingers, a lot of symptoms associated with multiple sclerosis, neural pain, burning sensations in my body. Again, my walking was not in a good place. Lost the ability for functionality. And so when I was diagnosed, I was lying in a hospital bed in Los Angeles. As a man in my 30s, I was not quite ready to just say, okay, that's it. So I asked my doctor, what do I do? What should I do? I mean, I was going to the gym, I was doing martial arts, having a very physical life, living in Hollywood. And he recommended that I try yoga and swimming to keep the body functioning and mobile and healthy, and hopefully slow any progression of the condition. And visiting friends in the hospital who came to visit me, I shared that with them, and they suggested that I try Iyengar yoga, because from their perspective, as we may know, those of us who practice Iyengar yoga, there is the ability to use the support of a prop that Mr. Iyengar, whom I call Guruji, had basically brought to yoga so that people could reap the benefits of the practice if they may not have the physical capability. And even if you do have the physical capability, as we also recognize, the props are not just for those of us who may have challenges, but really to intelligize the body in many ways that we can further explore and realize the benefits of the asana practice. So that's how I started. I got out of the hospital on it was a Saturday. I was released from the hospital, and I went to my first Iyengar yoga class the following Tuesday. So about 72 hours, I still was not able to, couldn't feel my body. I was not in a good state, but I was like, I have to take some action immediately. My feeling was and continues to be for others that I work with, that the earlier that we can, have some sort of an intervention, be it with yoga or medicine or whatever it is, that it offers perhaps a chance to get things into a healthy state and keep things in a healthy state to maintain a reasonable sense of mobility and functionality. So that's how I started.
So this diagnosis, it came out of nowhere. It came suddenly, or did you feel some gradual, maybe some feelings, and did it start suddenly like this?
I had been very busy, working, stressed. I was pursuing an acting career in Hollywood. I was also working in production in Hollywood prior to that. And, about maybe it was over the course of about a month, 6 weeks, I was starting to feel I was going to the gym, doing all, everything I thought to be healthy, although I was still living the Hollywood lives, smoking cigarettes and whatever's going on and doing all those things. But I was starting to lose sensation in my body. Like, how it feels when your foot falls asleep, when you're pressing on the body and it goes numb and tingling.
Yes.
This had started in my body, and it started basically in my right arm. I was starting to feel this tingling sensation. Then it transferred over to my left arm, down into my feet, into my legs. And then it started to, over the course of about a month, this feeling of numbness and tingling had consumed basically my body. I was still working, still like, okay, I'd seen a couple of doctors. We didn't have, didn't really go deeper into it. I'd seen a chiropractor because I'd practiced martial arts, and I was, going to the gym. I thought maybe it's a pinched nerve. But when I realized this was really kind of consuming my body, and it was very hot in the month of May in LA, and it was very hot, maybe about 31, 32 degrees centigrade. And one day, as it was getting progressively worse, the feeling of numbness had taken over my face and my skull, so I couldn't feel my face. And it was that numb, tingling feeling, and I thought something's very wrong. So that's when I was like, okay, get over your fear, get over your ego, and go. I mean, I contacted the neurology department because I knew it was something neurological.
Right.
I just felt it was because it was affecting my nerves. So I contacted a neurologist at UCLA Medical Center in LA, and he got me in the next day, which was amazing. And then I ended up, and he's like, I don't want you out there on the street. So I checked into the hospital that afternoon, and then we did the various tests.
That is quite fast, I would say, and it must be quite a shock, not just to the body, what is happening, but Garth, and you mentioned all these symptoms, which may vary probably among people.
Absolutely.
So what does it in general do with the mind? And I would like to mention here that probably when we are talking about these neurological diseases, we're not talking here about just, and help, how yoga may help. We're not talking about just multiple sclerosis, but also other diseases that can affect the motor skills. Is that right?
Sure. Serious conditions. I ended up, what I work with, just to give a little further background before I even address that next question, that once I became an Iyengar yoga teacher, studied in India for many years under Guruji's tutelage and guidance.
We will definitely get to it, yes.
So, because the yoga was having such a profound effect on my physical body. And yes, of course, what comes along with that, so I work with other people with Parkinson's, other neurological disorders, post-stroke, people who have difficulty moving their body, and with motor challenges, motor function. And the Iyengar tradition has certainly been extremely beneficial, which we can talk about in a moment. But you mentioned the mind. And certainly, aside from the physical body, as Guruji has certainly over the years mentioned, is that this is the known body. This is what we know.
Yes.
We don't necessarily know our mind, but we are familiar with our body. So if we can use the body as a vehicle to penetrate beyond the physical body into the various koshas, there's the physical body, the mental body, emotional body, intellectual body, and of course the more deeper spiritual side, we can use the body as that tool to help us find and discover more about ourselves. So when we are diagnosed with a life-changing, calamitous, I know maybe I don't know if that translates to Czech, but a calamity, like it's
the same word. Yeah, it's the Prashant's word, calamita. Yeah.
A calamitous event, if we're diagnosed with that, you know, our mind, it's going to affect our mind or emotions. You know, you put yourself in that position, someone who's in their 30s, suddenly you can't walk, you can't control your organs of elimination, your bowels, your, you know, the urine, and psychologically, it messes with you. So obviously it brings up emotions of anger, frustration, depression, you know, it's
fear,
overall fear, massive amounts of fear. And what on the good side of that, I suppose, if there can be a good silver lining, I was trying to find the positive silver lining of something, is that it's okay, well, I'm not dying. So that's good. But what can I do? What action can I take so that I can slow any progression of this incurable condition? There is no cure for it. And as I'm sure we've heard or perhaps heard of Guruji's, one of his famous quotes is that yoga helps us to endure what cannot be cured. And honestly, I mean, I when I started to go to the yoga shala in Los Angeles, the Institute in Los Angeles, I was starting to get some control of my body again. Feeling was starting to come back. I was starting to, you know, I think, and it's probably from, you know, the various asanas, when we're aligning the body in these various iconic asanas, that the prana, the life-giving force, is able to penetrate and move to those areas that may be otherwise dull, checked out, unattached, you know, we don't have feeling. I was starting to get this feeling back in my body again. And I was like, okay, well, this is giving me some hope. It's not going to, you know, I'm not going to necessarily cure the condition, but it's giving me some hope that maybe I can, if I can't regain everything that I had before diagnosis, and for the most part I have, thankfully, that it's a way that I can manage the condition with a reasonable amount of stability of mind, talking about the mind, and somewhat contentment to be, you know, but to get to that stage, Jana, you have to, there's a certain amount of acceptance that has to come into play.
And maybe also openness and coming out to the world that, you know, I was diagnosed with something, and it's certainly not just about this disease, about any disease, I would say. Acceptance and not only inside for yourself, but also to others.
Absolutely. You know, for the first, it's interesting that you bring that up, because the first few years of when I was diagnosed, I was working in Hollywood, working as an actor, trying to, you know, make it as an actor, all those, you know, all the pressures that come along with career, you know, acting, whatever it is, whatever career pressures are there. And I'm not quite sure what it is like in the Czech Republic, but certainly in America, you may not want to be forthcoming about something that can be perceived as something less than perfect.
Yeah.
That you have a condition. So why do you want to necessarily come forward with that and share that publicly with people when that can actually negatively impact your career, about getting a job, you know? And so a lot of people are very, very, and understandably private about that. And myself, I chose to not disclose that to anybody. Ironically, I was in an acting class, and I hadn't told anybody about any of this. And one of the exercises that we were tasked with was to write a monologue about, actually, it was about 9/11. We had to write a monologue about, the terrorist attacks in New York in 2011, or 2001, I should say. And when I started to write about this, I thought, well, wait a minute. I've already had my own terrorist attack. This, terror of like facing an unknown that has really knocked me down. It didn't kill me, but it knocked me down. And, and the morning that I saw those Twin Towers fall in New York, I was living in Los Angeles, but I'm watching it on television. It was the same kind of sinking feeling that I would get whenever I would have an attack of multiple sclerosis. So that's when I wrote about it for the first time. I wrote about it and I shared it with the people. And that's when I basically came out about having multiple sclerosis. And once I did that I think was a major step for me in terms of being forthcoming about what's going on, and then to take that forward. And so I decided, okay, then if I can be honest with others about what's going on with my body and me and myself, what can I do to help others along the path? And that's when I decided that I ought to become a teacher of the subject.
Well, you were very lucky, right? That there was available Iyengar yoga system at that time in Los Angeles, because that was not the case for many countries.
Yeah, absolutely. And the LA community was very strong at that point. And, in terms of, it was a community, since the pandemic, things have, kind of little fallen apart a little bit, but yeah, was lucky that because people think, why do you think you're lucky that you've been diagnosed with this thing? And it's like, because I've been given an opportunity and a pathway that I can explore something beyond, in addition to healing, to go a little bit further deeper into self-realization, which is certainly one of the aspects that we look at when we're looking at yoga in general, not just Iyengar yoga, but the subject of yoga, but the realization of the self, and the ultimate goal being freedom. So,
but this, you don't know at the moment, probably, of the diagnosis comes, you have no idea about this whole new field of exploration. Yeah, so
not at all.
That comes with years of practice. Yes.
No idea at all. And it was like, wow, I mean, this is really like kind of an amazing gift that I received. It certainly changed. Yes, it was a life-changing event. And we can either look at it as a positive event, a negative event. And I'm not saying that someone has to be diagnosed with a major disease to have that realization. But for me, that was the catalyst for me to say, okay, what can I do to help myself? And ultimately then to what's been given to me that in this way, like you say, being lucky, and I feel being lucky and blessed to have that, how I can maybe share that with somebody else so that we're not stuck in that state of depression and feeling like, helpless about your situation, that we can take action. And I always try to share with everybody that there's no guarantee that this is going to, have, you're not going to necessarily maybe get rid of the condition. You may not be able to do what you did before you had the condition, but it's a way to be able to endure what cannot be cured, as she says, I mean, it really was a profound thing. And when I started reading the Yoga Sutras, then discovering the Yoga Sutras, and Patanjali talks of Hayam Dukkham Anagatam, the pains of the future can and are to be avoided, and in Mr. Guruji's commentary, Mr. Iyengar's commentary, he mentions on that translation that, the past is done. We can't do anything to change the past. This is what it is. But if we can take action with courage and caution, which is what he said to me the day I met him, that perhaps we can alter the course of the future. And though we may not be able to eradicate the condition, the disease, if we can prevent it, the pains of the future can and are to be avoided. And if we can prevent the condition, whatever that condition may be, from going into a more deteriorating state, to be able to maintain as what we have without losing anything further. And even if we do lose something further, if we lose further ability and functionality, that we still are able to take those actions to perhaps slow any further progression, so that we can continue to lead and hopefully a reasonably normal life.
Garth, now that you mentioned also Guruji, would you recollect the first meeting with him and your experience? Because it is known, it is general knowledge maybe, that Iyengar system is quite tough, and it's demanding first when you are not familiar with this kind of like direct work. But Gitaji somewhere said something along the lines that people are willing to do very little, but they are expecting big results. So, but you have to give proper effort so that the results will be good. And now we are hearing this great story, right? That you are able to manage and control, and you have beautiful life, and you are happy in this way. But it had to be a lot of work and effort for you to be able to get into this state of the body and mind. So how was this meeting with Guruji, and what was, how did you proceed?
There's no question it's a lot of work. So after stumbling into the LA Institute initially, I was working with the teachers there that I had there, but I saw that I could recognize the discipline, and I appreciated the discipline that they had, and the knowledge and the depth of knowledge that they had. It's like, so where is that coming from? That's coming from the source, which is Guruji and Gitaji as well. So they first suggested that maybe I want to go to India right away. I was like, you know what? I'm not quite ready for that. I'm not quite, a lot of unknowns. There's so many unknowns, with the condition, my financial situation, things were like, whoa. I thought, well, let me just save my money a little bit, and then I can make the trip to India. So when I finally got there, it was a few years later, and perhaps it's my personality, but I thought I would like to speak to Guruji. I'm not going to live in fear of that. I've faced this fear already of this life, changing event. So when I was at the Institute, and I'd asked, we remember, maybe some people remember Pandu, he's still there, but it was the administrator. And I said, I would love to have a conversation or a meeting with Guruji at one point. This is when I first got there, in a couple of days. And so we arranged a time and went down to meet him in the library. He used to spend his afternoons in the library. And, Gita was teaching a lot of the classes. He was, directing from the back of the room at that point. Gita, this was before, the current dynamic of what's happening at the Institute in India. And so when I met him, I went up to him, and I, with respect, and it's like, Guruji, and of course there's a little bit of like, the master. And so I basically told him I've been diagnosed with MS, and I've been very lucky to have my teachers in Los Angeles who have been helping me on the path on his work, and it's having a great effect. But do you have any further advice for me? I'm dealing with this condition. And first, he didn't want to talk to me about it. And I was like, really? Okay. Like, I traveled around the world to see him. And it was like, so I thought, okay, don't crumble there. You have to be, I mean, if this is the man who really has an effect, I mean, the work's had an effect, so trust that he is this man. So I just, rather than walking away, I was like, I just waited to speak with him. And then he was like, okay. And I was like, all right. So then he got a nice little twinkle in his eye. And so what he suggested, one of the first few things he said to me is like, every day, first he told me that you can do everything, depending on how you feel on any given day. When you say do anything, it's like, what I so respected was that he didn't put me into this category.
Right.
You've got this condition, you've got this label, so you're going to come over here. You can't be part of like the rest of the community. Yes, you're welcome here. You can do everything, but you have to respect what's going on in your body. And so his direct words were every day. So every day you have to arrive to yourself, and every day you have to walk that line between courage and caution. So courageous enough to take action, but cautious enough to respect what's going on in your body, And so then he had me was in the library, he had me do a couple of asanas there, and he's like, I'll be watching you. So you have to be patient, exercise patience, and I'll keep an eye on things, and, and to look for, and I share this with others because maybe it's helpful to look for alignment, not only physical alignment, but how are you aligning emotionally, psychologically? He didn't say those words, but that's my, now after my studies for many years and also being around him for some, back and forth for many years, that alignment is not just the physical alignment. So we're not stuck on the physical body. We can often get stuck in that. That yoga translates into, asanas only. And, it's not, as we know that. And it's not, but we still need to use the body as that tool to discover the various other levels of the body within, that lead towards meditation, ultimate, freedom, ultimate, joy. And it was not without hard work to really put the effort in, as you mentioned, and Gita was extremely disciplined. And ultimately, both of them, even though they had very strong manner in the way they would teach, it was just so much compassion. It's really so much compassion. It's so moving when I think about, what they really took in. And I think they can recognize, or they had the ability, and I think a lot of us do have the ability to see how willing someone is to put the work in. What you're saying about Gita-ji, and I know she's seen a lot of people through her tenure as a teacher when she was alive, and very easy to recognize, yes, I want the fruit right away, but I'm not willing to put in the work that's required. And so I was inspired by the work, the discipline, and I think the previous, what I was dealing with before, working with martial arts, having that kind of Eastern philosophy as a discipline to, because one of the philosophies of martial arts, in my understanding, is to win yourself. You're not winning a battle. The battle really is winning yourself, winning the mind, overcoming the ego, to be able and to really win yourself in order to carry on. So it's not a battle of fighting, but what do the struggle really may be the struggle with your own mind of how can you overcome what can be considered a very challenging condition. and maintain that focus, that concentration, which, as we know, leads to meditation and samadhi. Those of us who know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I hope I haven't digressed too much.
It's all right. And so you mentioned props before, and now that we are in our mind with you, we are in Pune maybe. So what also in your teaching, what you learned there in Pune step by step, because you probably were there for a longer period of time or just 1 month?
I would go sometimes for, I started going for a month initially, a couple of months, you know, and
so even,
and Guruji was he was like, you keep coming back, keep coming back. You know, if you can spend time here, I couldn't like just move to India, but he was like, you just keep coming back and keep study with Gita here, please come and practice. So anyway, so in terms of props.
So from your experience, also from your teaching and your own practice that you started to do regularly, what is it in the props or in the body that basically you make a setup of the body that maybe wasn't here before? What is the nervous system missing that has to be implemented in the body, that has to come into the body so that the prana, the energy, flows freely again?
My understanding, and from Guruji, because I would ask him, questions. I don't remember all the questions I asked him, but over the years. So one of the things that he said to me initially, which I didn't quite understand, was look to align the afferent nerves with the efferent nerves. Now, we may not know what those nerves are, but, and essentially to tease that out a little bit further is like aligning the peripheral nerves, what we can feel from or whether we can or we can't feel it, with the motor nerves. So the efferent nerves are coming from the core towards the periphery, and the afferent from the periphery back towards the core. So now we may not be able to do that in a body that doesn't work 100%. So if we can use the support in such a way that we can find that, again, alignment, physical alignment, that it can penetrate, that then we may be able to restore some feeling. Or, if that's not the case, it's like, what happens when we do that? In an asana, when we have the discipline to have, and if I have to take a prop in order to get that alignment, then it creates hopefully some sort of feeling. So in terms of the use of the props, and what I encourage others are to use the props. I mean, for me at one point, I couldn't lift my right leg. It's my weaker side. So, I was certainly schooled under Guruji and Gitaji's advice that when I need to, and initially I needed to desperately, use the horse, the trestle, the blocks and the bricks to align the body, to align the efferent nerves and the afferent nerves. And my initial, I guess, resistance, and I see that a lot of times with especially newer students, is I don't need a prop.
Yes.
It's like, do you have any idea who I am? I'm somebody. I don't need a prop. And now I'm making a big thing out of that, but it's like, that for me, I had to get over my ego. I had to let my ego be quiet. It's like, okay, maybe what happens if you do take the prop? What happens if you do? Because everybody else is in this, doing all their things, and they're in the center of the room. They're not all taking props. But then I feel like, okay, well, I don't want to hold anybody else back. I can go in that direction. But I think it all stems from a little bit, for me, it was anyway, and I see that sometimes in others, not in a judgment way, but it's like, can we just let the ego be quiet now and take the prop? It's okay. It's okay to use that trestle. It's okay to use the wall. It's okay to use, a doorway. It's okay to use a brick, in order to get that alignment, so that it's aligning the spine, aligning the nerves, so that, again, the peripheral nerves can have a communication. That communication is blocked, and we can open up those pathways, those neural pathways, so that we can actually realize the actual effect of the asana. So using the props was a little bit difficult at first, because I wanted to prove to myself, look, I'm a man, I can do things, I'm strong, I'm not going to let this condition, I'm not going to let this disease take me over, I can do this. But be humble enough. Okay, you know what?
That's the hard part, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
To conquer these inner struggles.
Yeah, that inner, again, that
before we let go.
To win yourself. And winning yourself is not necessarily, I'm going to go, have a parade down, what is it? Wenceslas Square. Is that right? Am I saying that properly?
Yes.
So I'm not having a big parade down the square there because I won myself. I won myself by letting my ego be quiet. That was a really important lesson for me. Because what we end up doing is, and I share this with students all the time because they share it with me. It's like, I want to be able to do everything I did before. Right? Of course you do. I do too. So we get stuck in this conflict. We get stuck in that inner battle. It's like, I've got to prove to myself I can still walk. I want to prove to myself I can still, run. Or I can prove to myself that I don't need a cane to walk, or I don't need a whatever device it is. That's a different form of prop than a yoga prop. But to be able to get beyond that and winning yourself in that matter, that's where the victory, I think, can be.
Garth, when you are teaching worldwide, and so students are coming, students of yoga in general, right? Not just Iyengar yoga students. Also, I'm sure you're doing many events for patients, for people who actually have this or similar diagnosis, but also Iyengar yoga teachers or teachers of yoga in general are coming, yes, to your workshops and seminars. And I would like to ask here, what is the role of a yoga teacher in let's say, in general, in the field of therapy? What is the role? Because as much as yoga can help, we are not medical people, right? We are not medical professionals, right. Exactly. And we shouldn't even put ourselves in this role. But still, students are coming and with many problems, and so it can be a little hard sometimes. So what is the role of a yoga teacher when there is more serious diagnosis like this? And what are you teaching people?
Well, there are several things. I think there, because it's a big question. We are not medical professionals. We're not licensed in that way. If we can facilitate someone as a yoga therapist, so if we look at it more under the lens of a yoga therapist, and there are implicit therapeutic benefits to doing yoga. Certainly I'm a living, that's been my lived experience. So I feel I have to share that. And as a yoga therapist, because I'm also a certified yoga therapist, whatever that means, it's like, is that if we can help the student, you're not trying to control them, but how can we, not put somebody in harm's way? How can we perhaps have them reconnect with their self in some way, shape, or form? And maybe that's through the pathway of asanas. That once, what I was saying earlier is like when we start doing things and it starts to work on our mind, works on our emotions, works on our intellect. We don't necessarily need to articulate that.
Yes.
But I think to be able to facilitate that for the students, to encourage them to continue to look for stability and mobility at whatever level, whether we're looking at something therapeutically or not, and to be, mindful to not let ourselves as the teacher try to control that person, because they have agency over themselves, but to really be able to observe what that person is going through, how to safely guide them along something, and especially from a therapist's point of view, in line with what their goals are. What are their goals? Because you may have people with all sorts of conditions. Like one of my students, whatever, has Parkinson's many years, also has high blood pressure, also has, migraines. Another one has osteoporosis. So taking all those things into consideration, and how do I safely guide that person on their path, so they begin to also reconnect with themselves and be in line with their goals. From a teacher's point of view, what I often share with teachers is when I spoke to Guruji first and foremost about teaching, I said, Guruji, when I see people, when I work with people, and when I see people with MS, Parkinson's, and all these other conditions, my heart goes out to them. And his response was, what good does that do? You have to put that in your touch as a teacher. Touch doesn't necessarily mean physical touch. It can mean that intellectual, emotional touch, and that touch to help them put that your students in touch with themselves in a way that will facilitate their pathway towards whatever their goal may be. And how do I do that? And when Steve got myself a little more educated, I suppose, not that I'm all that educated, but with the Yoga Sutras, one of the cities, or one of the what we'll call the effects that comes from a practice of doing the work on yourself first, is Paravaya Prakesha, I believe it's in the third chapter. It's the ability, I want to say it's the 39th sutra of the third chapter in terms of a reference point. Parakaya Pravesha is what it's talked about in Guruji's commentary. And it's the ability to put yourself in somebody else's body. And you're not trying to put yourself in that person's body, but again, it's that touch. It's like, what's going on with them? What is my what's my deep level of sensitivity? So if I can get a sense of what that person is going through, what that person is experiencing, what are they looking to do? Because that helps guide me as the teacher. What's their number one goal? And if I can then draw upon my own practice, and what do I know as a teacher of the subject from my own practice that may be of benefit to help them? And then how can I, with sensitivity, observation, and sensibility, further guide them in a safe manner that maybe they can begin to realize something in a positive way, a goal. May not be able to go out dancing, you know what I mean? If you're in a wheelchair, you may not be able to get up and start going out dancing. But if I can, really get myself, help that person through my own practice, what I, using what's been handed on to me and from my own personal experience to then further enhance that person's experience. So I don't, as a yoga teacher, yoga therapist, that's what I try to communicate as best I can. And I think Guruji's words were profound, that we may have an idea of what we want to do, and it's not book knowledge. It doesn't come from a book. It comes from our own practice and having again, drawing on the Yoga Sutras, friendliness and compassion. You know, in the first chapter, we talk about compassion and friendliness, Maitri, and
Karuna.
To really have that compassion. So, and that also has to be, I think, initially addressed towards ourselves. Not to be self-absorbed, but how can I have compassion with myself and my drive, my motive, my execution? To quote Prashant, what's your drive, motive, motivation, and purpose? You know, to ask those questions. It's like, what, you know, if I can approach that with compassion, self, you know, exploration, self-discovery, svadhyaya, and how can I let that be informed by these principles that have been presented to us from, you know, the Patanjali and certainly Guruji's interpretation of that and his physical, the way he passed that on. And certainly, of course, Abhijata is carrying that torch with, I think, brilliance.
Yes.
And of course, Prashant continues to, you know, encourage that in that same way. I don't know if that answers the question or what.
Yes, definitely.
But that's my understanding, you know, because you know, to be able to put yourself in that person's body, and then as a teacher, what? Imagine if you are in that person's body and you go to a teacher, what would you want to have? To let that inform, then you have that communication with your students, hopefully, as opposed to coming in and being the boss. You know what I mean? Because some people come, I'm not saying something, you know, whatever, that can happen. It's like, wait a minute, I'm the teacher, you're the student, you have to listen to me.
Well, it has to be both ways.
Yeah, there is that dynamic, but we have to find that balance. You know, and be sensitive. And sensitive.
We are coming to an end.
Yeah.
And I would like you to say if now someone is interested to meet you or to study with you. You wrote a book, you have online classes, and you are teaching all over the world, also in Europe. So would you maybe tell us where we can study with you? Sure.
Well, my website is Garth. Just put Yo in front of my name, yogarth.com. And so what I've been doing right now, when I'm traveling abroad, it's impossible for me to do online classes when I'm traveling. So I will be doing some online classes for people with MS, and it's not only for people with MS, but also teachers are welcome to come to that, to modify that to the best as one can in an online environment. And in an online environment, I request that people to please be able to get up and down, be independent enough to get up and down from the floor, because it's very frustrating to do anything. I mean, we can do stuff in a chair, but those are the classes that I offer online, because I'm not there to help. I can't reach into the screen and, like, you know, help you move a prop or put something in a position. So that's an option. And that's one reason why I started traveling again, when I've been invited to come to work with certainly people in this population who may require a little more assistance. And so my schedule for the rest of this year is basically on there of where I'll be traveling to. I'm in Israel and whatever,
France, Denmark
next week, and then I come back. I'll be back in Europe, in the Europe area, in London, Florence, Paris, Utrecht in the autumn, September, beginning of October, and then in South America in November, and then otherwise I also do online private classes with people. So maybe, you know, because I work with several people who have that dedicated time. So it's just the two of us online, like we are talking now, to be able to really focus on what may be helpful. And that's contingent upon my availability. But of course, we can always work something out. And so by contacting me there at yogarth.com, and my email is garth@yogarth.com. Hopefully that's easy enough to remember.
I will put all these information and links in the subtitles.
Anyway.
Yeah, and the book, and people can see on your website as a reference to studying and teaching also.
And the
principles.
The big book is a starting point. It's impossible because everybody is unique in their manifestation of whatever the condition is. So it's a starting point, drawing upon my personal experience from teaching and practice of things that have helped, in my experience. And so, again, like I say, it's a reference point. And the reason I put the book out in the first place, which if I haven't mentioned this with us here today, but it was after Guruji's 100th birthday celebration. It was the 100th birthday of his existence. He passed away prior to that. And the night before I was leaving after the celebration, and I went to visit Gita-ji, who had been also a strong teacher of mine. And she was like, Garth, we know you here very well, and would love to, not everybody knows you, but it would be so great if you would be able to write something for other teachers, for other people with MS, and what your experience has been. And great if you could do that. And I said, it would be my honor. Of course, I'd love to share that. And that was, then the next morning, I had seen her that evening. The next morning, she passed away. She left her body. So I was like, okay, all right, I am committed to writing this book. Put something to honor Gita-ji's wishes. And I put some pen to paper. And the book is available. It was published in 2020 is when it came out. And trying to get as much as possible into a limited amount of pages. But it is available worldwide on Amazon. It can be ordered through the publisher in London too, but probably easier on Amazon. And if you search for either my name, Garth McLeanem, on Amazon, whatever platform that is, I think in Czech Republic, it's available perhaps through Germany's platform of Amazon.
Also, yes.
And it's called Yoga and Multiple Sclerosis. If you search for my name, it'll.
And still, people have to search for experienced and certified teacher who is able to make therapy because.
Please, exactly. Yes, absolutely. And there was a study that just came out this week or last week. I don't know if you've seen it. It was, and those were the teachers that I'd also worked with. I'd gone there to teach at their studio in Moscow before the current situation with the political situation. But they had done a study, and the study was really about, is physical therapy better, or is yoga better? And it's not about the other. The effects are similar, when we can have good benefits. But from this particular study, what was discovered was that the quality of life and physical functioning and social functioning, which is a huge part of survival, was found to be a little bit more beneficial, perhaps, in a yoga dynamic. So,
I will also put this link below the video and also in the subtitles, so people can check and read for themselves. So Garth, thank you for this interview. Originally, we planned only 30 minutes, but almost 1 hour. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the stay in Czech Republic and have a safe flight home. And I hope to see you maybe next time here. Or online when you
I've set a date to return to Czech Republic.
Good.
Yeah, for next September 2020.
Nice. Okay.
So, I'm sure that information will
You mean 24, September 24?
September, September, whatever, the weekend right now, but in 2024, I'll be back
24.
Here. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking forward again. And thank you very much for sharing your experience and also the philosophy and of BKS Iyengar's work and blessing.
Thank you very much. And
thank you, Garth.
may you and everybody who may have interest be blessed with perfect health, and God bless. So
have a good health. Yes.
Namaste.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.